Good afternoon. Welcome to Grand Rounds today. Today I have the pleasure of actually reintroducing Dr. David Moore. Dr. Moore has previously presented in his role of neurologist and epileptologist, and today he is here to present in his role of Director of Clinical Research at McFarland, and he's kindly accepted our invitation to give us an overview of clinical research, and I think he's going to touch on some of the recent COVID trials that the Clinical Research Centers participated in, and please join me in welcoming Dr. David Moore.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd also like to introduce Aaron Hackett, who's our research coordinator for McFarland Clinic. We're going to talk about clinical research and overview and what's done at McFarland, but before that, we need to talk about an intro in terms of what clinical research is and what we try to do. So the definition of clinical research is that it provides quality care to improve quality of life for patients. This is done by collecting safety data, efficacy data, and doing comparison data with existing medical treatments or existing diagnostic testing to see if we can improve on testing. Industrial sponsored clinical research is sponsored by industry, either pharmaceutical or biotechnology, in which we're looking at industry providing funds and sponsoring a clinical research that they would like at some point in time to bring to the market to use. Academic clinical research is not funded by industry, but is funded typically by nonprofit organizations or by the government, where an academic physician or an academic professor, like at Iowa State, would get research dollars to investigate a product or a treatment to treat a certain disease state. And once that was found to be effective, they would then search out an industry sponsor to help initiate to get something on the market. Physician-initiated clinical research, something that a physician would do like here at McFarland, would be that we would conceive with the research we wanted to do, and we would develop a protocol and would have that pass through a local IRB and then internal review board, and then we could initiate a clinical trial that we ourselves would sponsor and look at. When we look at clinical trials, there's typically four primary phases. A phase 1 trial is when you have a medicine that you say, this medicine will treat this condition, but we haven't really used it in patients and we don't know what the effect is in patients. So we'll take a small group of patients, maybe 15 to 30 healthy individuals who have no medical problems and are not on any medical therapies. We would take and give them different doses of the meds to see what toxicity or side effects the medicines would cause a normal person. That would be phase 1. If a drug makes it through that phase and there's no negative or adverse effects, they would pass on to phase 2 trial. A phase 2 trial is when we take a larger group of patients who have a specific disease and we look at efficacy in that condition as well as side effects in that condition and see how the medicine pans out. Phase 3 trials are what we do most often here at McFarland, and a bridge to that or a coordinator for that is someone like Accellacare. Phase 3 trials is when you do multiple studies over a variety of different platforms or places. So in the US, Europe, South America, and we look at safety data and efficacy in treating a various disease state. So one drug that we can look at is ezogabine, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in another slide. A phase 4 trial is basically a post-marketing trial where a medicine has been released to go on the market. It's effective, but the company wants to get more additional safety data so that they can prove that the medicine is safe over time. When we look at medicines and want to know about their true safety and how safe they are, you have to look at how well they treat a particular disease state and their safety over time. If you look at all those steps, to bring a medicine to market, it costs on the order of millions of dollars. When you look at the discovery phase, optimization phase, which would be a phase 1 and phase 2 trial, preclinical trials, and then the clinical trials. And so when a company wants to sponsor a medicine, they're making a very good, huge investment and something that they hope will be able to come to market and probably play a major impact on a person's health care. So if we look at checks and balances, it can take 9 to 12 years for a medication or device to make it to the market. So you have the preclinical testing trials. And if I were to look at lacosamide, for example, the other name for lacosamide is Vimpat. A scientist in Houston looked at other anti-epileptic medications and said, this molecule is what they use to treat seizures. If I make this molecule and add on a couple of other CH3 groups or OH groups or NH3 groups, it may treat epilepsy. So that was done with lacosamide. Once it was made and they tested it in animals and animal models and other models of epilepsy, they applied for an investigational new drug application to the FDA. The FDA said, yes, it's okay to use it in humans, but you have to show proof of preclinical trials, toxicity, how it's being manufactured. And these things all have to be set up first. After that's set up, you can go through an IRB, internal review board, and this internal review board makes sure good clinical practices are set up, and they create and review all the paper documents that go along with bringing a medicine to trial. From there, you have phase 1, 2, and 3 trials. Once it passed through all of those stages, you then can apply for a new drug application. And the FDA has approved this now for medical use. If you look at patients and what patients think in terms of research, so when a patient is seeing research, they oftentimes may be, not only do they get free care and free follow-up, but they also may get reimbursed for participating in a drug study. So if you did a questionnaire of patients who have participated in drug studies, they feel that there's been a reduce to their healthcare costs. They feel that they have improvement in their overall healthcare well-being because they're coming in and seeing the physician more often, and that contributes to an improved quality of life. So when we look at research past, present, and future, what have we learned from the clinical trials? What do we know about clinical trials? Well, number one and most important thing for everyone to realize is that not every medicine or medical device makes it to the market. About 5 out of 5,000, let's say, medications that we'd like to come and put on a medical treatment, use as a treatment, only 5 of those will make it into a phase 3, 4 trial. Of those that make it into a phase 1, 2, or 3 trial, only 1 of 5 actually make it to clinical use. The whole idea behind doing clinical research is we hope to reduce the cost for patients by bringing new medicines to market. We can improve their overall health, and by improving their overall health, we can improve their overall quality of care. Patients are sometimes reimbursed for doing this, and physicians are recompensated for taking care and using the time that they have to do or participate in drug studies. So what we'd like to do in terms of at McFarland and through Accellacare, we'd like to increase involvement of physician participation in clinical research. We'd like to increase the number of clinical trials that we can do for clinical research to improve our patients' quality of care, to improve how people look at McFarland. They say this company or McFarland Clinic is at the high end of doing clinical research, then patients increase their trust in us and taking care of them. Participating in research provides a lot of things for the clinic because it includes sometimes multiple subspecialties that are involved. So in some of the studies that we've participated in, they've included cardiology, ophthalmology, radiology, and laboratory have all been involved in one research study, which really helps the clinic in terms of succeeding in our own goals and our objectives. In terms of how McFarland Clinic has made changes in studies, we are recently, like Dr. Hallberg said at the introduction, we've done some Regeneron trials with COVID-19. We've done some Regeneron prophylaxis study. We've done studies looking at migraine in terms of prodromal syndromes and at migraine acute care. and chronic care with the CGRPs that have recently come to the market. CGRP stands for calcitonin and gene receptor peptide inhibitors, big mouthful. We're currently doing a study looking at multiple sclerosis. So very few studies have ever looked at, can we improve cognitive functioning in people with MS, or can we slow the progression of cognitive impairment in MS? So we're working currently on a medicine that is approved for treatment of MS, but we're looking on how it affects and delays cognitive decline. Detection of atrial fibrillation, we've done some studies looking at Fitbits, in terms of how accurate can they detect atrial fibrillation and other arrhythmias. So as I mentioned earlier, not all medications make it to the market. So retatrutide is a very interesting drug. Its other name is Accellacare or Potiga. We were involved in the study here. We had like 5 or 6 patients participate. And after a while, we noted that there was a blue discoloration of your eyeballs and of your skin. And it got approved by the FDA. It was on the market for about 2 years, following which the company stopped using it or took it off the market because it wasn't being used very much by patients. There's other medicines that we've participated in that were not effective, and so they never made it to the market. But most drugs fail in clinical research because they did not show to be efficacious in terms of the condition that they were being used for. So if we look at a drug market, different divisions of McFarland or specialties in McFarland, we've participated in drugs for the central nervous system, anti-inflammatory drugs, and cardiology, endocrinology, medicines, vaccines, and in oncology trials. Most recently, we participated in the COVID trials, and I'll let Erin talk about some of the COVID trials.
So we work with Dr. Killian on several COVID trials here at the clinic, and we were able to partner with Mary Greeley to get most of these completed, which was a huge accomplishment for us and for Accellacare to be able to incorporate inpatient studies into what we do on a daily basis. So our very first COVID trial was an inpatient treatment trial. And then we're currently working on outpatient treatment trials with the Regeneron infusion drug. So in being able to do that, we were able to collaborate with the COVID inpatient unit at Mary Greeley, our emergency room, because that was the safest place here in Ames for us to infuse those COVID positive patients, along with the infusion center once that opened. And then the laboratory and the pharmacy were also instrumental in helping us out with these studies. So it was a huge undertaking. Our patients here at McFarland Clinic and in Ames were very eager to participate in those trials, and it kind of got us on the map here in Central Iowa. So we were very fortunate to be able to work with those. And we thank Dr. Killian for jumping in and getting the ball rolling. And because of our work on the COVID treatment trials, we were contacted by the Department of Health and Human Services that wanted to come and meet us. So everyone's heard about that. We were able to meet with the governor and the Department of Health and Human Services director, Alex Azar, last fall. And we were able to bring in our very first patient that we infused into that study to meet them and to discuss his experience with that trial. So it was very positive. It really made us all feel really good about what we're doing here, that we got a little representation and big pat on the back for what we do. So. Okay, so Accellacare within McFarland Clinic. Accellacare, we're an integrated research company. So we work with healthcare institutions to bring research to our patients. And our #1 vision here at Accellacare is that clinical research is a care option. We want to incorporate that into our patients' care on a daily basis. So along with the regular medications or devices that they may get, we also want them to know that research is here as an option should they need it. Oops. Right here is just the areas within the United States where we have Accellacare sites. We started in the South and we're expanding to Illinois, Iowa, and California. So we did want to talk about investigator involvement within our Accellacare model. This is kind of a busy slide, but we'll go through it here. So for each new study that we start here at Accellacare and McFarland Clinic, we need a primary investigator. And along with that, we also need sub-investigators to help. So with that, there are protocol-specific trainings. And we like to learn, we want all of our investigators to be comfortable with the study, to be comfortable with the trial, to know the study medication. So there's trainings involved with that. Our physicians and providers need to be available to meet briefly with our study team, with our coordinators, to ensure proper oversight of all of our studies. So there's study visits that require our investigators to be present, to do things like physical exams, to ensure that our patients meet the inclusion and exclusion criteria for all of the studies. And they work very closely with our study coordinators to work the patients into your schedule and to get everything done. Certain studies have physician-required procedures or sign-offs, like I said, and patient referrals for research is huge. We're able to, look through EMR to find patients, look through the physician's schedules to locate, patients that might fit a certain study. But having that physician involvement, provider involvement with our staff is very helpful in us being successful with our studies. And your patients, if they'd be open to participating in trials, and if they'd be a good trial patient. So physicians will need to maintain clinical oversight of our study. So if there's ever any adverse events that a patient may experience, it's keeping an eye on those, making sure the patient's safe. And our coordinators, we have 4 coordinators on site along with myself. We do 90% of the work. We do all the paperwork for you. We alert you when there's emails that you need to pay attention to. And we make sure you get all the information that you need. So our study coordinators. So here at McFarland Clinic, our Accellacare site, we have 6 staff members on site. Myself as the manager. We have Christy Elliott, who is our regulatory coordinator. So she does all of your startup paperwork, submissions to the IRB, to the sponsor. She keeps track of all of that. We also have 4 study coordinators. Along with myself, 2 other ones are nurses, and then we have 2 that are certified clinical research coordinators. So our coordinators do 90% of the work, like I said. They schedule all your study visits. They bridge all the activities between the sponsor and the provider. So we schedule the visits, we complete the visits, we manage all the patient contact, manage the lab work, the imaging reports. Our coordinators do all the procedures that we can do. We will perform the lab draws and the processing and the shipping. We do the EKGs, the spirometry. We provide them with the study medication, trainings, and we coordinate any imaging that needs to be done. So the role of the study coordinator is to take on all the legwork, to make sure it's a smooth process for the patient and for the providers. And we try our very hardest to ensure that there's very minimal intrusion in your daily workflow. We work with you to ensure that, when we're bringing these patients in, it works with your workflow, whether it be at 7:30 in the morning, over the lunch hour, or just within your patient day. Whatever's easiest for you, that's what we're here for. The first part of participating in a clinical research trial is completing your good clinical practice training. So this is something that every single staff member has to complete. It takes 30 to 60 minutes. We use an online platform called Firecrest that gets sent to your email, and you complete it. It's something that needs done every 3 years, but it really helps us to make sure that we are taking into consideration the ethical issues that could arise, and it just helps us to ensure that we're keeping our patients safe. Along with that there's training for every study. At the start of every study is where the bulk of it comes in, because we learn about the protocol, we learn about the medication or the device, any risks, any things that we need to keep close attention on. It's provided by the sponsor. Thanks to COVID, most of it is all online and easy to access. Pre-COVID, we got to take little trips to Florida or Denver to do investigator meetings that would take a day or 2, but really it's all online now. Investigative reimbursement. I know Dr. Moore would like to speak to this.
So whenever there's a drug study that goes on, there's a budget that's created, And within McFarland Clinic, we create a budget what we think the costs are in terms of each visit. And so investigators are reimbursed through this pool for each visit that the patient has. And typically the reimbursement is not discounted. It's for whatever our actually fees are for that service, plus a little bit more, typically. That brings us to the pipeline in terms of what types of studies are we looking for between now and 2022. And I'll let Erin talk more about that.
Yeah, so our team's identified the key areas that we are expecting to see studies in this year. And those main areas include neurology, so our CNS areas, psychiatry, neurology, pulmonology, and respiratory studies. Vaccine, infectious disease, we're very hopeful that there'll be a COVID and influenza combo vaccine coming out this fall, so we're keeping an eye on that. And then immunoinflammation studies, dermatology, GI, rheumatology are big. And we always have oncology studies. Those are always an area that we're keeping an eye on. So within McFarland Clinic, what departments can help us with these studies? Family medicine, internal medicine is huge. Providers in those areas can do almost any of these studies, really, with the, not all of them will even need a specialist. So migraine and diabetes, those don't have to be neurology and endocrinology. Those can be our family med docs. Pediatrics, we've submitted for COVID vaccine studies, so we're keeping our fingers crossed that we'll get a pediatric COVID vaccine study so we can present that to our population. But other areas that we've seen coming through for pediatrics are pneumonia, autism, infant nutrition, meningococcal vaccine, and migraines. And then GI is a pipeline that's always quite open. And a lot of these indications can be covered by our family practice and our internal med doctors, including NASH studies and IBS. So, and along with the heavy indications that are coming through our pipeline, there's always other indications that are trickling through at all the time. So if ever a provider is interested in a specific indication, we give it on to our feasibility team and they try to find studies for us. That's the great part of our network. Good.
So a couple of things about drug studies before we end. One is if you sign up to do a drug study and you don't get good enrollment, that might inhibit you from getting studies in the future. In order to get started to do research studies, you have to have had some in the past or be a sub-investigator on a study to show that you've participated or have a true interest in doing some research or clinical research. With that, I'll open it up for any questions that people may have. Tim, do we have any questions at all? While we're waiting for questions, how long has McFarland Clinic been participating in doing research studies? So I came to McFarland Clinic in 2000. And when I came, I was doing some phase 4 studies looking at levetiracetam or Keppra. And since then, I've always participated in studies my whole time here. So I would tell you that in terms of neurology department, we've been doing studies off and on for the whole 20 years that I've been at McFarland Clinic. Oncology has been doing studies not through Accellacare, but through other broad oncology groups or networks to look at studies in terms of improving treatment protocols for patients with cancer. There have been maybe some mechanical devices that we've looked at in doing drug studies or technical studies here at McFarland and at Mary Greeley. So Tim, it doesn't look like very many people have any questions. So should we call it there then?
Sounds good. Thank you for presenting.
And thank you for your kind attention. Have a good week. Goodbye.